Thank you very much. I just had one question on your take. This life that you're living now in this,
right?
Okay, obviously your mortal self here. Do you believe? What's your thought on past lives? Obviously, there is this energy which is put into this mortal capsule which we have, and as you said, at some point, people who are of a very small minority are lucky enough to be able to have these kinds of conversations that we're having. Does that mean that do you feel that you transcend and you're not going to be a part of the mortal engine that drives that cosmos anymore? Or will you always come back and be recycled? In a way.
Well, I think that where the action is in the material universe. So where the most exciting place to be is where the creative action is happening. And so you can only participate in the evolutionary process or in the creative process is through form. So in a disembodied state, we don't have the power to affect change. In whatever form or state we're going to be in, without being very attached to a form, and a form that can actually engage with the material universe, we're not going to be able to affect change in the universe. So the evolutionary awakening is realizing that, I see, in the traditional orientation, spiritual enlightenment was about transcending the impermanence of physical embodied life and the inevitable pain and suffering of existence. So the evolutionary awakening is saying, well, yes, pain and suffering is an inherent part of an embodied existence. But I mean, if you think about the lives that most of us lead here, I mean, we experience so much less pain and less suffering than human beings have experienced for most of the time that humans have actually existed. So we've reduced the amount of suffering to an enormous degree, but that's a relative point. The other point is that we realize that being here is the whole point, because if spirit is the energy and intelligence that initiated the creative process and is driving the creative process, that we recognize that spirit can only awaken to itself through us, because of our high degree of evolution at the level of consciousness and cognition. Because spirit can only awaken to itself to the level of development of any particular species. So spirit can awaken to itself through the consciousness of a butterfly, but then spirit's going to have butterfly consciousness. So butterflies can't enact conscious evolution in the name of spirit because they don't have those spiritual or cognitive capacities. And the same thing with the snake. Spirit can awaken to itself as a snake, but it's only going to have snake consciousness. And what about dog consciousness? Pretty good, right? English people love their dogs. Why do they love their dogs? Because they touch their dogs, they're very affectionate. Because English people are a little, ooh. If you're on the subway, right, and you touch them, oh, I'm sorry. Right? English, it's a very funny joke, but if English, it's the same. If you just touch, sorry. But oops, I'm sorry. In New York, if you just, it's like, you don't, whatever, But here it's sorry. But if it's your dog, you don't have to say sorry. Oh, yes, hi. But, so there's dog consciousness, and so the Zen parable is that the Zen master asks his student, does a dog have Buddha nature? Buddha nature is consciousness. So he says, does a dog have Buddha nature? And the disciple says, yes, because the dog does have Buddha nature because dogs have consciousness. And he says, can a dog become enlightened? And the answer is no, because dogs don't have self-reflective awareness. They don't have the capacity to be aware of awareness. They have awareness, dogs have awareness, but they don't have the capacity to be aware of awareness. So enlightenment or awakening to consciousness can only happen in a highly evolved sentient being that has the capacity to be aware of awareness or to be aware of consciousness. So in this highly evolved capacity for self-reflective awareness, not only can we be aware of awareness, but we can suddenly awaken to not only the ground of our being, but we can awaken to this entire cosmic unfolding that has made it possible for us to have the awakening we're having. And the degree to which we awaken to that fact is the degree to which then we can begin to actually take responsibility for the whole thing, at least to some degree, for all of it. And so when you realize that, you realize where the action is right here in this body. This is where the action is. This is the most exciting place to be. You know, inherent in all the dangers of the world that we're living in, inherent in all the possibilities of injury, of psychological and physical injury, and pain and death. In light of all of that, the most exciting place to be is here, because spirit can only affect the world that spirit created. We can only consciously affect that world in and through this form. So then we rediscover the glory of our own humanity and the spiritual significance of being human. And in the way that I teach, that discovery is the ultimate remedy for the postmodern predicament, which is, I'm the luckiest person that's ever been born, and I'm miserable and victimized, and I don't really know if life is worth living, and I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. So when, in light of that, you realize that spirit's dependent upon you in order for the process of cosmic, biological, and cultural evolution to take the next step, that suddenly makes you very important. It's kind of you could call it a cosmic form of narcissism if you want to, as a joke. But it actually, if you take it seriously, when you awaken to this moral imperative I was speaking about, you suddenly begin to take life very seriously. So what's the problem? The postmodern predicament is that so many of the luckiest people that have ever been born they don't know how to take life seriously. Culture doesn't tell them how to take life seriously. They take their psychological experience seriously, their emotional experience seriously, their biological desires seriously, their materialistic desires seriously, but they don't take life seriously. They don't know how to do it. Culture doesn't tell them how to do it. So with this kind of awakening, this kind of perspective, it shows us how we can take life seriously, how to take this life seriously, this very life, in the midst of all the complexity of the global predicament we're facing, amidst all the complexity of our own personal predicament, amidst all of the imperfection that we are. We can take it all very seriously for the highest reasons. And then, and the first question was the difference between living a spiritual life versus not living versus not. Then your whole life, when you take it seriously, becomes an expression of spirit in action, because you realize that's the whole thing. That's what you're doing here. That's the whole point of this existence. Without that, life doesn't mean anything. Otherwise, you're just living a materialistic life, satisfying narcissistic and selfish desires. Ultimately, it doesn't mean anything. But when you discover that, you realize this is where the action is. The most exciting place to be is in this world as you are, in all our imperfection, right now. And that's completely enlightening. I mean, and then you go, oh my God, this is like the most amazing. This is it. I'm actually in exactly the right place, exactly where I'm supposed to be. Now I have to get busy. I got to get with it. I have to start doing it. I have to take it all on. You see, I have to become a real player. And then you have all kinds of challenges you have to face. You have to start doing heavy lifting. You have to face criticism. You have to face your own weakness, your own division. All the challenges really start then, because you'll see all the different parts of you that don't want to play the game of life that seriously versus the part of you that does, and the battle that's going to go on there. And then you actually don't want to just have an internal experience, but you actually want to have an effect in the world. And then you're going to be doing God's work, and then you want to succeed, because if you succeed, spirit succeeds, there is a measurable effect that you have affected the world for the better to some degree. And then God is working through you, so to speak. I mean, what else could there possibly be for us to do at this point? I can't imagine anything else. So there's two possibilities. I think either we should be busy finding solutions to the problems that exist and that are facing our threats for global survival, for poverty, and tribal madness in the Middle East and in Africa. On one hand, we should be busy, because these are real problems that aren't going to go away, and they're problems that affect all of us, or we should get busy with, carving out this new territory that I'm talking about. Otherwise, what are we doing? We're probably just wasting time. In a personal world, it doesn't seem like it, but when you look impersonally at it all, it's very different. From the personal, psychological ego's perspective, it doesn't look like you're wasting time because you're taking care of yourself. But from a cosmic perspective, we're not here just to take care of ourselves. We're here to make a difference. Why? Because we're the luckiest people that have ever been born. Would I give a lecture like this if I was at a small village in Africa? No. Of course not. But I'm not in a small village in Africa. We're in central London here. Huh? We're the luckiest people that have ever been born. So we have a different burden. And so, yeah, we have to get over our egos so we can take responsibility for our tremendous good fortunes. And it's a big challenge. It's an enormous challenge. But then life becomes more than worth living. It becomes the only life there is to live. And then you're going to want to come back. And you want to come back in the midst of the fray and keep going. Because how else is God going to create the future unless you do it? Follow? Yeah. So it's totally exciting. It's very challenging. It's viscerally challenging. It's challenging at a visceral level of the soul. So there's no like escapism in it. But it suddenly makes your life make sense, and that's ultimately what we need, is to find a philosophical and spiritual, moral, philosophical and approach to life that suddenly makes sense out of it all, because the postmodern predicament, as I was explaining, doesn't make any sense. You have highly developed, intelligent people that don't know what they're really doing here. And so when we find out absolutely what we're doing, then we can discover a kind of conviction in which is going to get us out of the ego and into the process. And then from then on, it's just the future, and then if we stick with it, we're going to be at this for eternity. So then the Bodhisattva vow, have you heard in Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva vows to not accept his or her own complete enlightenment until all sentient beings become enlightened. And only then will he or she accept their own full enlightenment and then go into nirvana forever and never have to come back. So I've taken the Bodhisattva vow and reconfigured it. So in the new Bodhisattva vow is even more challenging than the traditional Bodhisattva vow because now you basically are, it's similar, I guess. You vow to keep returning and returning until all the matter in the universe turns to light. Light is consciousness. So this is matter, right? But this matter is lit up with consciousness. Isn't that right? So then you could say metaphorically, this is just a metaphorical idea. I don't really know what it means, but it's just keep us busy with some kind of amazing idea. So you say when all the matter in the universe turns to light, which means become consciousness, the original mission when God created the material universe, then you could have said the purpose has been served. But we are so inconceivably distant from that. I mean, it's not even within the realm. It's not even worth thinking about. So you say, so then I vow to come back again and again and again and again, because God's totally dependent on me to create the future. Follow? And then that's it. There's nothing more to do. Then we just have to get busy and do it and do it and do it forever. Now notice, if you say forever, do you really mean forever? You mean like forever? Because what's been built into our consciousness, from our traditional history, is that you're supposed to get a vacation. You mean I don't get to go to heaven in between and get a little day off, a few years at the health spa in heaven? You see, so if you remove that note, because you see, what I find so intriguing about this idea is that a lot of people say, I don't want to die. A lot of people say, I don't want to die. There's this instinctive fear of death. But then when you introduce people to the notion of like being infinitely engaged with the creative process, there's a recoil, there's a subconscious recoil, oh my God, that's too much. Isn't that interesting? I find it very interesting because really? I don't really want to live forever, do I? No. So you see, when you start to say yes to evolution, which is, remember, the understanding of evolution, knowledge of evolution is a very recently emergent dimensions of reality that we didn't know about. So saying yes to evolution has very powerful spiritual implications for the individual, and it involves saying yes to life in ways that we never really have before. And then saying yes to also eternity, yes to the future, yes taking responsibility for all of it. So that means we have to kind of become God, so to speak, either metaphorically and literally. And you can see there's a recoil, there's a soul recoil. Say, well, I don't know if I want to be that committed to the creation of the universe, right? So that you could call that, we could call that the ego, couldn't we? That's any part of the self that would resist God or the absolute nature of God, we could call the ego. So any part of ourself that would resist that absolute calling is another word for ego. So in an evolutionary context, that's what we have to sacrifice to get over. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.